The morning sun cast long, dancing shadows across the worn wooden floorboards of Mrs. Eleanor Davenport's modest cottage. She sat by the window, her gaze fixed on the tranquil garden beyond. It was a scene of serene beauty, yet a heavy weight seemed to press upon her heart. Eleanor had been widowed for nearly a decade. The loss of her husband, Thomas, had left a gaping hole in her life. He had been a kind and gentle man, a pillar of strength in their small community. Their love had been deep and enduring, a bond forged in the trials of life. As she sipped her tea, Eleanor's thoughts drifted back to the day she had found the old, yellowed letter. It had been tucked away in a hidden compartment of Thomas's desk, a place she had never explored before. The envelope was addressed to him, the handwriting unfamiliar. Curiosity had compelled her to open it, and as she read the contents, her world was turned upside down. The letter was from a woman named Sarah, a woman Eleanor had never heard of. Sarah claimed to have had a passionate affair with Thomas years ago, before they had met. She wrote of their shared dreams, their secret rendezvous, and the deep love they had once felt for each other. Eleanor's heart pounded in her chest. How could she have never known about this? She had always believed that Thomas had been faithful to her. The thought of him with another woman was almost unbearable. As she reread the letter, a sense of betrayal washed over her. She had trusted Thomas with her whole heart, and now she was questioning everything she thought she knew about him. The letter had opened a Pandora's box of doubt and uncertainty. Eleanor tried to dismiss the letter as a misunderstanding, a figment of Sarah's imagination. But the more she thought about it, the more convinced she became that the letter was true. The details were too specific, too intimate to be fabricated. She felt a surge of anger towards Sarah, for daring to intrude upon her life. But her anger was soon replaced by a deep sadness. She had lost her husband, and now she was losing the idealized image of him she had held so dear. As the day wore on, Eleanor found herself consumed by thoughts of Thomas and Sarah. She wondered what had happened between them, why they had kept their relationship a secret. She longed to confront Thomas, to ask him for answers. But he was gone, and she would never know the truth. The letter had shattered her sense of peace and security. She felt lost and alone, adrift in a sea of doubt and confusion. As she watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Eleanor knew that her life would never be the same again. The days that followed the discovery of the letter were a blur of conflicting emotions for Eleanor. She felt a deep sense of betrayal, yet she also experienced a pang of sympathy for the woman who had written it. Sarah's words revealed a love that had been lost, a connection that had been severed. Eleanor found herself drawn to the letter, rereading it over and over again. She tried to imagine the woman who had written it, the woman who had shared a part of Thomas's life with him. Was she beautiful? Intelligent? Kind? Did she love Thomas as much as Eleanor did? The more she thought about Sarah, the more her sense of jealousy grew. She had always been confident in her relationship with Thomas, but now she was plagued by doubts. Had she been enough for him? Had she been able to make him truly happy? Eleanor began to question everything she knew about her marriage. Had there been unspoken secrets between her and Thomas? Had he ever considered leaving her? The thought was almost unbearable. As the weeks went by, Eleanor's mood began to darken. She withdrew from her friends and family, preferring to spend her time alone. The once vibrant and cheerful woman she had been was replaced by a shadow of her former self. One evening, as she sat by the fire, lost in thought, Eleanor heard a knock at the door. She opened it to find a young woman standing on the doorstep. The woman introduced herself as Sarah's daughter, Emily. Emily had come to visit Eleanor, hoping to learn more about her mother. She had found the letter among her mother's belongings and had been intrigued by the mention of Thomas Davenport. Eleanor was hesitant to speak to Emily. She didn't want to relive the pain of the letter, and she wasn't sure what she could tell Emily that she didn't already know. But as Emily began to speak, Eleanor found herself drawn into her story. Emily told her about her mother's childhood, her dreams, and her love for Thomas. She described the heartbreak her mother had suffered when their relationship had ended. As Emily spoke, Eleanor felt a sense of empathy for Sarah. She realized that Sarah had been a victim of circumstance, just as she had. Their love for Thomas had been a shared experience, a bond that had connected them despite the distance of time. Eleanor began to see Sarah in a new light. She was no longer just a rival, but a woman who had loved Thomas deeply and had been hurt by his betrayal. She was a woman who had suffered, just as Eleanor had. As Emily prepared to leave, Eleanor thanked her for visiting. She told Emily that she would think about her mother and the letter. She promised to write to her if she had anything to share. As Emily walked away, Eleanor stood at the door, watching her until she was out of sight. A sense of peace washed over her. She had learned something valuable from Emily, something that had helped her to see her own situation in a new light. The letter had brought her pain and sorrow, but it had also forced her to confront her own fears and insecurities. It had helped her to understand the complexities of love and loss, and to appreciate the fragility of human relationships. As she closed the door, Eleanor knew that her life would never be the same. The letter had changed her forever, but in a way that she was beginning to accept. The weeks that followed Emily's visit were a time of introspection for Eleanor. She found herself revisiting old memories, examining her relationship with Thomas from a new perspective. She began to see the complexities of their love, the compromises they had made, and the sacrifices they had endured. She realized that Thomas had been a good man, a loving husband. The letter had revealed a hidden part of his life, but it hadn't changed the love she felt for him. It had simply deepened her understanding of him. Eleanor also began to see the letter as a gift, a way for her to connect with Thomas in a new and profound way. It had given her a glimpse into his past, a chance to understand his motivations and his dreams. As she delved deeper into Thomas's life, Eleanor discovered a man who was passionate, ambitious, and full of hope. She learned about his childhood, his struggles, and his triumphs. She discovered a man who had loved deeply and had been hurt deeply. She also learned about the woman who had written the letter. Sarah had been a strong, independent woman who had pursued her own dreams. She had loved Thomas fiercely, but she had also been willing to let him go when she realized that their paths were diverging. Eleanor felt a sense of admiration for Sarah. She had been a woman who had lived her life on her own terms, who had not been afraid to take risks. She had been a woman who had loved deeply and had been loved deeply. As Eleanor's understanding of Thomas and Sarah grew, she began to see the letter as a bridge between them. It was a connection that had been lost, but that could now be rediscovered. One day, Eleanor decided to write to Emily. She told her about her thoughts on the letter and her newfound appreciation for Sarah. She also shared some of her own memories of Thomas, hoping that Emily would find them comforting. Emily replied quickly, expressing her gratitude for Eleanor's letter. She told her that she had been touched by her words and that she felt a sense of connection to Eleanor. As Eleanor and Emily continued to exchange letters, they formed a bond that was based on shared experiences and mutual respect. They discovered that they had more in common than they had ever imagined. Eleanor realized that the letter had not only changed her life, but had also brought her closer to others. It had helped her to connect with Emily and to understand Sarah in a new way. It had also helped her to appreciate the complexities of human relationships and the enduring power of love. As she sat by the window, watching the sunset, Eleanor felt a sense of peace and contentment. She had come to terms with the past and was ready to embrace the future. The letter had been a challenge, but it had also been a gift. It had helped her to grow as a person and to appreciate the beauty of life. The months that followed the exchange of letters with Emily were a time of healing and renewal for Eleanor. She had come to terms with the past and was looking forward to the future. She had found a sense of peace and contentment that she had not experienced in years. One afternoon, as she was tending to her garden, Eleanor received a phone call from Emily. Emily was excited to tell her that she was planning a trip to England to visit the places where her mother had lived. She had always wanted to see the places that had been so important to Sarah, and she hoped that Eleanor would join her. Eleanor was thrilled by the invitation. She had always been fascinated by England, and she was eager to learn more about Sarah's life. She agreed to join Emily on her trip. A few weeks later, Eleanor found herself standing in front of the quaint cottage where Sarah had lived as a child. The cottage was much smaller than she had imagined, but it was filled with charm and character. As Emily led her through the cottage, Eleanor could feel the presence of Sarah. She could almost hear her laughter, her voice, her stories. She could imagine Sarah as a young girl, running through the fields, playing with her friends. Eleanor and Emily spent the next few days exploring the English countryside. They visited the places where Sarah had worked, the places where she had fallen in love. They talked about Sarah's dreams, her hopes, her fears. As they traveled, Eleanor felt a deep connection to Sarah. She could understand her mother's longing for a different life, her desire for love and happiness. She could see the pain that Sarah had endured, the sacrifices she had made. Eleanor also felt a renewed sense of gratitude for her own life. She was grateful for her husband, for her children, for her friends. She was grateful for the love and support that had surrounded her. When their trip came to an end, Eleanor and Emily parted ways with heavy hearts. They had shared a special bond, a connection that had been forged through their love for Sarah. As Eleanor returned home, she felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. She had found a way to honor Sarah's memory, to connect with her in a meaningful way. She had also discovered a new appreciation for her own life and the people who loved her. The letter that had once brought her so much pain had now become a source of joy and healing. It had opened her eyes to the beauty of the world, the power of love, and the enduring nature of human connection. As she sat by the window, watching the sunset, Eleanor smiled. She knew that her life would never be the same, but she was grateful for the journey that had brought her to this point. The years that followed Eleanor's trip to England were filled with peace and contentment. She had found a way to honor Sarah's memory and to connect with her in a meaningful way. She had also discovered a new appreciation for her own life and the people who loved her. Eleanor continued to correspond with Emily, and their friendship grew stronger with each passing year. They shared stories, memories, and dreams. They supported each other through life's ups and downs. One day, Emily announced that she was pregnant. Eleanor was overjoyed for her friend. She couldn't wait to meet her new grandchild. As the months passed, Eleanor found herself eagerly anticipating Emily's arrival. She had always loved children, and she was excited to become a grandmother. When Emily gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, Eleanor's heart melted. She held the tiny bundle of joy in her arms and felt a surge of love and affection. As the years went by, Eleanor watched her grandchild grow and develop. She was amazed by her intelligence, her creativity, her spirit. She saw glimpses of Sarah in her, and it filled her heart with joy. One day, as Eleanor was reading a book to her granddaughter, she noticed a familiar name. It was the name of a small village in England, a place that she and Emily had visited together. Curiosity piqued, Eleanor looked up the village online. To her surprise, she discovered that it was the birthplace of Sarah. Eleanor felt a surge of excitement. She knew that she had to share this discovery with Emily. She wrote her a letter, telling her about the village and her hopes of visiting it together. Emily was thrilled by the idea. She had always wanted to return to England, and she was eager to visit Sarah's birthplace. A few months later, Eleanor and Emily found themselves standing in front of the quaint village where Sarah had been born. They walked through the streets, imagining Sarah as a young girl, playing with her friends, exploring the countryside. As they visited the places where Sarah had lived and worked, Eleanor felt a deep connection to her. She could almost see Sarah's ghost, wandering through the streets, watching over the village she had loved. At the end of their trip, Eleanor and Emily stood on a hill overlooking the village. They looked out at the rolling hills, the quaint cottages, the peaceful countryside. "It's so beautiful," Emily said, her voice filled with emotion. "Yes, it is," Eleanor replied. "Just like Sarah." As they stood there, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Eleanor felt a sense of peace and contentment. She had come full circle, returning to the place where Sarah's journey had begun. She had found a way to honor Sarah's memory, to connect with her in a meaningful way. She had also discovered the enduring power of love, the importance of family, and the beauty of life. As Eleanor turned to Emily, she smiled. She knew that Sarah would be watching over them, proud of the legacy she had left behind.